Hello to all my friends gathered for the National Foundation for Women Legislators Human Trafficking Summit. I think you know I would much rather be there with you in person, but there's just a few things going on right now, and I'm honored to join you via video. I'd like to thank the National Foundation for Women Legislators for hosting today's summit on an issue that's close to my heart. And I'd like to thank my good friend Cindy McCain and my Senate colleague, Senator Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, for their life-saving work on this issue. The United Nations considers human trafficking to be one of the 3 largest criminal enterprises in the world. The other 2 are drugs and illegal guns, and it's not just happening in faraway lands. In February of last year, a man was indicted in federal court under the leadership of our U.S. Attorney Andy Lugar. That guy's alleged crime? He trafficked a 12-year-old girl from Rochester, Minnesota. She received a text message that invited her to a party that she thought was from a friend, but was actually from a sex trafficker. He picked her up in a McDonald's parking lot, threatened to abandon her in Minneapolis, and raped her. Then another person took her to a hotel in another city and forced her to take explicit pictures of herself that were posted on Craigslist. She was then sold to 2 more men. A 12-year-old. Horrifying stories like these are why I worked with Senator John Cornyn of Texas to pass the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act in the Senate, and Congressman Eric Paulson introduced it in the House. It was signed into law by President Obama a year ago. It tackles sex trafficking and makes sure that we put the victim's needs first. The new law includes my bill to help ensure that minors sold for sex are treated as victims, not as criminals. That provision was modeled after Minnesota's safe harbor law that our state lawmakers, led by women legislators, worked so hard to pass. The law will give incentives, our federal law will, to states when they're applying for federal grants to have a safe harbor law in place. 15 states across the country already have comprehensive safe harbor laws, and at least 12 more states are making good progress in that direction, so it's not starting from scratch. The law also requires the creation of a national strategy to combat human trafficking. This national strategy will encourage cooperation and coordination among all the agencies who work on this problem, federal, state, tribal, and local. We also need to be giving sex trafficking victims the right support. The law allows victims to participate in the Job Corps program to help them get back on their feet and help victims pursue financial restitution from their abusers. Trafficking is a tough issue, but it's inspiring because you see girls that turn their lives around. You see people of all faiths, all political beliefs, all backgrounds. Just look around the room today. The women legislators are working on this issue and are literally changing people's lives. Cindy McCain and I spoke to the National Conference of State Legislators when it was in Minnesota just last year. And I saw firsthand the incredible work going on a state-by-state basis. Yes, this federal law is important because it sets some incentives in place. We've gotten the Justice Department on board in a big way with Loretta Lynch and her chief deputy, Sally Yates, having handled these cases themselves on the front line as prosecutors. But we all know most of the work is going to be done on the local level, in the state district courts, in the legislature. So that's why your interest in this is so key. I leave you with one story. When Cindy and Heidi and I were in Mexico, we visited a shelter, and in the shelter we talked to some young women, and many of them could speak English, and many of them had been there for a while and had gotten in a much better place and were able to tell their stories and also their improvement, their recovery, and what their plans were for the future. But there was one girl there, her name was Paloma, and all she did was cry. The tears just rolled down her cheeks. She never spoke. And as I looked at her, I thought, what horrific experience has she had in her life that would just make her sit there when 3 Americans came to meet with her and all she could do was cry. It reminded me of what a refugee once told me in a refugee camp in Jordan. She said what she had seen in her lives, the horror she had seen with her neighbors and her family members murdered, would make stones cry. That was Paloma's experience. Whatever it was, it would make stones cry. So thank you for working on her behalf. Work hard, get some things done. It's going to happen at the state level, and it's in your hands. Thank you.